Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me along. My name is Willie Drennan, and what I do is I travel around telling stories and playing music, and I suppose that's why I've been invited here. I'm particularly noted for being into the Ulster-Scotch side of things because I grew up outside Ballymena where everybody talked Ulster-Scotch, and all aspects of that culture were sort of ingrained in me from when I was a wean. But it should be fit to understand me because I was out of the country for 21 years. Actually, I was doing a wee presentation. You'll discover as I go along here, I don't have a programme prepared as such because I sort of feel it out to see what I can get away with, you know. But I did have a similar situation a couple of weeks ago, only I was at Hillsborough Castle for Prince Charles and Camilla. I was there as a storyteller and a musician at their house party. So the story I started off telling them was about the fact that they might not understand me. and I explained the situation where I was travelling around for years, and at first I had great difficulty because of the way I talked. I was travelling around Europe at first, working in different places, and I told the story about my first trip to America and explained to them that I met this young lady, this rather attractive young American woman, when I was travelling around Europe, and she says to me that I should go and visit her in America, and she told me she lived in a place called Cape Cod, which is about halfway between New York and Boston. So I did. I went out to America, first time ever in America, and I landed in New York City Airport one night all by myself. And big story there, but I'm not getting into that today. The next day I set off to go to Cape Cod, because she told me there's all these beautiful beaches and all there, you see. So I got into the bus station in Cape Cod and then went up to the public telephone, got this wee bit of paper with the girl's name on it and her telephone number, and I rung the number. But I just got this strange dialing tone. So I wasn't too sure if it was engaged or what, so there was this lady, an older lady standing behind me waiting to go onto the phone, and I reached the phone to her and I says to her, "Excuse me, missus, can you tell us if the phone's engaged or no?" And she just stared at me. I didn't say a word, just stared at me. So I thought I'd better elaborate on my circumstances. Says, "Look, missus, I just got off the plane in Northern Ireland. I'm trying to get the whole of this wee girl on the phone, but there's something wrong with the phone or something wrong with her. You know, tell us what's going on." She just stepped back and stared at me with these big wide open eyes, obviously thinking I was from another planet. Maybe she wasn't that far wrong, you know. So I realised I was having serious communication difficulties. So I thought back to my school days and the proper English that they tried to hammer into me in those days. And in the best English that I could talk at the time, and as slowly as possible, I explained the situation to this lady one more time. A big smile came to her face, and she stepped forward and she went, "You speak into this end here." So that's when I realised I'd have to do something about the way I talk. So I've been working on it ever since. You know, the problem is I've been back now for 17 years and sort of picking up a wee bit. So anyway, I have a few wee things I would like to run by you today, just to give you a wee bit of insight into what I do, and most of it's related to Ulster-Scotch culture, or it's all related to Ulster culture anyway. And I thought of a couple of things a couple of stories that I would tell that make reference to the Shankill Road, so I thought that would be appropriate. And one of them has to do with the First World War, so I'll do a couple of things in the First World War later on. I'll show you a wee bit of some of the instruments. I do have this flute here. I started off playing in a flute band, just like a man that you might know called James Galway, but we'll get into that in a wee minute. I would get into schools a lot, you know, and I would demonstrate these different instruments. And when I would play the flute, I would explain that this was the flute that was played by a very, very famous flute player called James Galway. And he started off playing a wee flute like that there. Nowadays he plays flutes made out of gold and silver. And maybe one day when I grow up I might get one of those golden flutes. And then I start to play that. But of course, Mr. Galway has hit the headlines there just over a week ago. And I got myself into a wee bit of bother because I reacted to what he said, and I wrote a wee song. Well, I cheated a wee bit because I set the song, the words and the tune to another very famous song that I thought was quite appropriate. And I posted it on the internet on a site called Slugger O'Toole. That's all I did, I just put this poem up, this wee song. And a lot of people thought it was brilliant, but then a lot of people thought it was absolutely outrageous that I would say this. So anyway, I just wrote it just over a week ago, so I'll see. I think it's not over a week ago, it was last Monday.
That's right.
Exactly a week ago I wrote this. And it goes something like this, if I can mind it. In the Belfast town where they built the Titanic, the folk are all merry, but oft times bit manic. James Galway, he lived there, a flutter by trade. All of us thought him a stout orange blade. On the 12th of July, as it yearly did come, James played on the flute to the sound of the drum. You may tug a piano, or fiddle, or lute, but there's nothing can sound like the old orange flute. But this cunning wee flutter was just having us on. He took off his orange flute away far out beyond. He forsook his old mates and forsook the old cause that gave us our freedom, religion and laws. He played on his orange flute far away from his home. He played it in Paris, in Berlin and in Rome. When folk heard his tunes, they marched up and down. It was just like the 12th day in Belfast town. But the powers that be in the world out beyond don't want their folk marching when the notion comes on. So they took away his orange flute and they smashed it to shreds, and they gave him a gold flute to play in its stead. And this new gold flute turned out quite magic. It played the new pop tunes, the jazz and the classic. But try as he would, he could never get the old noise. No gold flute e'er plays the Protestant boys. No dolly's braes, no more wine water. Soon dolly's braes no more did matter, for James lost the bat when big money he made, and soon forgot here was a stout orange blade. When news of all this came back o'er the ocean, the boys in Belfast, there is a commotion. But James he just laughs now, for he's so rich and famous, he now curses King Billy and calls himself Seamus. Turala, oh dearie me, curses King Billy and calls himself Seamus. I suppose it got me, the thing about it was, with me being out of the country so much, I came across boys like him everywhere I went, and the word out there, the propaganda against anything from Northern Ireland on the Unionist side or a Protestant side was just incredible, so that the boys like me were wondering, where did I come from, you know, what was so terrible about me when I played in a flute band on the 12th day, you know, what is wrong with Orange men, you know, what is so terrible about them, because I started to think back to all these Orange men I knew and thought, some of those people are actually the salt of the earth, you know, so I was confused for a while, and then I realised it was all about the publicity that was out there. It was all about the movies and the novels and the way journalists came over during the Troubles looking for a story that they wanted to write and found it, no bother, and back and wrote it. So the news that people were being fed all over the world wasn't good for anybody that grew up as a Protestant or with a Unionist mentality in Northern Ireland. So and in my mind that actually made things worse, because it encouraged people to send over vast amounts of money to terrorists here to blow people up, to blow up their neighbours. And so it's something I felt very strong about for a long time. I was just totally unhelpful, you know, because the story was totally imbalanced. So when James Galway came out with that, and I read, you know, analysed what he said, you know, because it was you could pick it up on the internet, and I thought, you know, that was really unhelpful, because it almost encouraged an IRA bombing campaign and justified people to go out of their way to promote that idea that there's only one side that did it wrong, instead of the fact was there was both sides who did things wrong. Anyway, that's my preaching done for the day. I'll show you this drum here.
Please.
I was almost going to bring a lambeg drum in, but the last time I brought one in here, I was in the main hall down there, and the acoustics down there are quite bright, you know, so I thought it was a wee bit over the top. But this here is one end of a lambeg drum. And there's a wee bit of a story behind this drum here, because I got it from the man who made it, Tom Loudon. He makes lambegs up near Ballymoney. And Tom didn't want to sell this to me at first, because he says to me, you see this skin here? He said he took it off a goat that he'd known ever since for a long time, and he watched that goat grow into a big full-size goat, and then he watched the goat get old, and it got older and older and older until one day it dropped dead, or dropped dead, is what he said. And when it died, he took the skin off the goat, and he turned it into this drum, and he told me the goat was called Billy, because it was a billy goat. For some reason, anybody in County Antrim I know that keeps goats, if they got a billy goat, they call it Billy. Not very imaginative, but that's just it. So this here's Billy, and I'm just realising I forgot to bring my beer, but that's a good thing about having a flute in two parts. You can take the end off it and make work of beer. So not too bad. So I'm going to sing a wee song. A lot of what I do is, you know, is about our culture, but it's also about our history. And one of the very important things that gets overlooked here in Northern Ireland, the history of Northern Ireland, is that this was a thriving place for industry. The linen industry, for one thing, you know, was just massive. Everybody was employed in that. And then in Belfast, you know, there's the rope works and shipbuilding. And it was funny that when that big movie came out about the building of the Titanic, hardly anybody in the world knew that, the movie came out about the sinking of the Titanic, hardly anybody knew that it was actually built in Belfast. It was only a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago I suppose it is now, where they were commemorating the anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, that folks started to realise it was actually built in Belfast. So the thing about the Titanic, when it was being built, there was thousands of people. Maybe some of you had relatives who were involved in building the Titanic, because I spoke to a lot of people in Belfast, and they said, oh, my uncle, my grand or whatever worked in the Titanic. And my great aunt, she saw the Titanic when it was, she just died there 2 years ago, 101. And when she always said that her big sister told her that she saw the Titanic, but she was only about 1 year old at the time. Her big sister was carrying her, holding her in her arms. They lived in White Abbey at the time, and everybody was out watching the Titanic. So she saw the Titanic, but apart from that, I don't know if any family members worked in it. But anyway, thousands of people all around Belfast worked in it. Great satisfaction when they built this biggest boat in the world. And then of course went off this maiden voyage from Southampton to North America and struck the iceberg, and everybody knows the horrendous story. And when the word came back, everybody was absolutely devastated. But there were wee men in the shipyard who built it, Billy, Geordie, Sam, Hughie and wee Tom. They did not want to take any responsibility for the ship sinking. As they quite rightly pointed out, they just built the thing. They didn't sink it. And it was perfectly fine when it left the yard. So this is their wee song. Don't blame Billy, Geordie or Sam. Don't blame Hughie or wee Tom. Don't blame us and don't blame me. Poor Titanic beneath the sea. In Belfast said she'd never be sunk. They never thought they were in for a gump. Hammering sore and hammering hard on the big boat belt in the Belfast yard. Ship Titanic was to be her name. What a pun, what a shame. Don't blame Billy, Geordie or Sam. Don't blame Hughie or me Tom. Don't blame us and don't blame me for Titanic beneath the sea. In 1912, in the spring of the year, big girl showed she had no fear. Southampton Quay she sailed away, bound out for America. And the folks on board were as glad as could be, just to be part of the history. They sung their praises up and down on the big boat belt in Belfast town. Don't blame Billy, Geordie or Sam. Don't blame Hughie or wee Tom. Don't blame us and don't blame me for Titanic beneath the sea. So sing with pride and sing out loud. We're the boys, true and proud. We're the boys from Belfast town. I'm sure you know when we're around. In the yard in East Belfast, we built that big boat meant to last. Folks said she'd never be sunk. Never thought they were in for a gunk. Don't blame Billy, Geordie or Sam. Don't blame Hughie or wee Tom. Don't blame us, don't blame me for Titanic beneath the sea. So, when I was growing up, fiddle and music was very strong in mid-Antrim. And they used to say that in the 1960s, before Irish traditional music became commercialised and very, very popular, that around mid-Antrim, around places like Cullybecky and Ahocko, there's probably more traditional musicians than any other part of Ireland. And of course that all changed. And then the Troubles, when the Troubles happened, sort of killed it for traditional music, for people from a Protestant background in most parts of Northern Ireland, but around my part it still continued to a certain amount because it was just so ingrained in the families. I've been talking to people in Belfast, and apparently it was the same in Belfast. There would have been fiddlers, you know, who played in Shankill Road and East Belfast, you know, in days gone by, and people would have had stories of fiddles being found up in the attics and things like that there, you know. So anyway, I'll play you a wee fiddle tune of some sort. One of the things that was distinct about fiddlers in this side of the province, in County Antrim and County Down, is a brilliant book actually that someone just gave me recently called Hand It Down. It's all about fiddle playing in County Down, written by this boy called Nigel Bouillet, I think's his name, and absolutely incredible, full of old photographs and stories about the tunes they played and where they played them. And the really striking thing is that in every chapter is photographs of people playing the fiddles and dancing in Orange Halls. It's just but that was exactly the same as it was in County Antrim as well. The Antrim and Derry fiddlers would have met in Orange Halls, well sometimes in GAA halls, and then the next month they would meet in Orange Halls, you know. And it was just one of those things that was something that everybody shared, and it was something that was totally accepted as part of the culture in the Orange tradition as well, you know. But and the one thing that would be distinct about it would be the Scottish influence, and so many of the tunes would be Scottish in origin. And one of the big connections that I would have with the Scottish music is that I was a big fan of Rabbie Burns ever since I was a wean. I grew up hearing folks singing these love songs, you know, Ye Fond Kiss, my love's like a red, red rose, and Ye Binks Braves the Bonnie Doon. Everybody sung. My mother would have sung that. She was a bit of a singer, and she had also recite the words that she heard from her schoolmaster in Slap Primary School. Oh, what some power that gift ye gies to see yourselves as others see us, at what frae money a blunder phrase and foolish notion. So I grew up hearing all that stuff, you know, but I didn't think much of it until I was a teenager, and then I just started reading Rabbie Burns' poems, and I realised, first of all, I could understand it, because growing up in rural County Antrim, I understood the language, or most of it anyway, and also I started to realise why he struck such a chord with people here. You know, first of all, he was a Presbyterian, and there was a bit of a conflict going on in Scotland at the time among the Presbyterians between the New Licht and the Old Licht, and the exact same thing was happening here in Belfast as well. I think in Rosemary Street in the late 1700s there would have been 3 Presbyterian churches, and I think at least 2 of them would have been the equivalent of the New Licht in Scotland. So people could understand that. And it's also the time of the just after the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and Burns he was sympathetic to the ideals. Well, he was a big supporter of the French Revolution, and he was sympathetic to the ideals of the French Revolution. And at that time here with the United Irishmen, sort of that consciousness as well, people could relate to what he was talking about. He was basically shouting about equal opportunity for everybody. He was also a Freemason, and a lot of that consciousness came across in many of his poems as well. So there's so many connections with Burns here that certainly explains why he's an incredible influence on our culture to this very day. That's why in the month of January I'm still very busy going out doing Burns nights and Burns suppers and things like that there. So where I was going with that there, the big thing about Rabbie Burns was, as far as the music goes, was that he collected hundreds and hundreds of old songs and tunes for the Scots Musical Museum, and because of that a lot of those old tunes were preserved, and some of them would have come from this side of the Shock as well. And those tunes that he played, that he used for his songs, and also for little skits that he did, little theatre skits and things like that there, those tunes were all played here in Ulster. And when I was listening to old fiddlers, they quite often played the repertoire of Rabbie Burns. Maybe they didn't even realise that Rabbie Burns had collected those airs. But so there's a great connection with Scotland right through our history. I'll play a wee tune, just a wee slow air here of Rabbie Burns. So anyway, the next big connection, I'm sure I've doing a wee overview here. The next big connection that we would have with the fiddle music would be with North America. Because, as you know, thousands of folk left here in the 1700s and went out to North America, and they took their music with them. Now, they settled in the Appalachian Mountains at first, most of them, and they became known as the Hillbillies. And they were called Hillbillies for 2 reasons. One was they lived in the hills, and the second reason was a lot of them were called Billy. So there you go. Some folk would say it might be the reason why a lot of them were called Billy or Bill or Will was something to do with King Billy, because this wasn't too long after the siege of Derry, and it was the next generation that would have went out after that, and they were supporters of the ideals of King Billy, so that's probably some legitimacy in that speculation there. So I'm going to do what we do in our Ulster-Scots nights is we always do a bit of the crossover music and explain that we have a set that we do called the Gospel Mountain Mix-Up, explaining that a lot of people from here took their devout religious principles with them and started singing gospel music in the Appalachian Mountains, and when they got mixed up with Germans and English folk and Scottish folk, it took on a whole genre of its own. But I can't do the mix-up, the Gospel Mountain Mix-Up, because I have to have a whole bunch of people singing with me so they get mixed up, you know. But I'll do this wee song here. This was actually a poem that was written by W.F. Marshall, the Reverend W.F. Marshall. He's probably more famous for writing things like I'm living in Drumlister and Clabber to the knee, that sort of stuff, you know. But he wrote a lot of poems about our history and our culture. That he wrote a poem called The Blue Banner on Ulster Day in 1912, and it was published in the newspapers on that day, all about the signing of the Covenant and connecting it with the Scottish Covenant as well. So he's famous for that sort of stuff as well. But he wrote a poem called Hi Uncle Sam that very effectively explains the impact that the Ulster folk had in the American Revolution. And actually I'm going to do this on this other instrument here. You can probably hear the words better. I set this to a wee tune. This is a mandolin, by the way, which I suppose is another American influence that's come back here to influence us. I actually bought this here out in Kentucky when I was out there. Mandolins and banjo mandolins are still very popular out there. So this is Hi Uncle Sam. When freedom was denied you, imperial might defied you. Who was it stood beside you? A Quebec and brandy wine, and dared retreats and dangers, red coats and Hessian strangers, and the lean long rifled rangers, and the Pennsylvania line. Hi Uncle Sam, hi Uncle Sam, hi Uncle Sam. Whenever there was fighting or wrong that needed righting, an Ulster man was sighting his Kentucky gun with care, and all the road to Yorktown, from Valley Forge to Yorktown, from Lexington to Yorktown, that Ulster man was there. Hi Uncle Sam, hi Uncle Sam, hi Uncle Sam. Brave men, the North paraded grave men, that they might not be slave men, but ponder this with calm. The first to face the Tory, the first to lift Old Glory, Major War and Ulster story, think it over Uncle Sam. Hi Uncle Sam, hi Uncle Sam, hi Uncle Sam. If there's any questions, or anybody wants to challenge on this, you know. I mean, I've more tunes and things I can play, but if anybody wants to ask me anything at this point, or
what date, how far back do they date them tunes?
Well, you see, Rabbie Burns, I would often refer to Rabbie Burns because, you see, he collected these tunes, in 1700s. He died, he was born in 1759 and died in 1796, so mid-1700s, he collected the tunes, but most of them were old tunes. Some of them would have been the popular tunes of the day, but many of them were go back to the early 1700s, you know. So, funny, that's come up on, I'm on Twitter, and that's come up a debate with some, it's an American academic called John White, who was from here originally, and he was getting this thing, these Americans who were into fife and drum reenactment were saying, you know, how many tunes are there from the 1700s that you know, 4 or 5? But this man got into, knew a little bit about it, says, well, Willie Drennan will probably tell you there's hundreds, and he's right, there's literally hundreds. If you think of all the orange tunes, you know, and many of those tunes were similar, they might have been played as dance tunes as well, you know, and some of them would connect to Scotland, some of them connected to tunes that were played in Southern Ireland. I mean, a lot of those go back to the 1700s, you know. Like maybe even the Protestant boys there that James Galway's forgotten how to play, maybe that's probably Lily Bolero, that's the name of the tune. I think that's, you know,
was a French one then?
I think that's
came from France.
I think you're right, and that's probably, you know, maybe early 1700s, you know. So there's all kinds of tunes like that they're so old that nobody really. But I would say that the 1800s in particular, just a wealth. The other thing that is very significant, very unique around my part of the country, and other parts of Ulster as well, is the lambeg and fife tradition, where they slow down the tunes for the lambeg, and a lot of those tunes had absolutely nothing to do with politics or history or nothing. They were just the dance tunes that they adapted for lambeg and fife and slowed them down so they fit in the lambegs. And you know, there's hundreds of those tunes, hundreds of them that would, you know, 1800s anyway, you know, but they were traditional tunes as well. So a lot of them would get back to the 1700s, you know.
Would they, is a lot of them reflected? See, today as well, I'm interested in the band scene, like, but so the tunes of the band. When I ask bands, people within bands, what's that tune at such and such? Where did it start from? Where did this? They don't seem to know.
No,
they don't seem to be able to follow.
No, there hasn't been enough research done. There is a man called Gordon Ramsay, Dr. Gordon Ramsay. He actually lives up the top of the Shankill now in Woodfield up there. He lectures at Queen's University, and he'd be known as an ethnomusicologist. But he's played, and he was in the British Army originally, you know, and that I think he grew up in England or something. But he has studied all this because he's been into the flute band scene as well. So he's probably the person who's most knowledgeable about the origins of the tunes, you know.
Would he be open to being invited to speak to a small group like us?
I would say he most definitely would, yes.
Dr. Gordon Ramsay, our esteemed secretary.
I could get you a contact number for him.
Please do.
I just wrote the thoughts of knowing. I think there is an area there that isn't known by the majority of people within bands. The history of the tunes you're actually playing and how far they date back. You know.
No, it's certainly fascinating, and it's another thing. It's a thing that sort of, once you start examining that, you realise just the richness of the culture, and you know, when you realise how many tunes were actually played and how old they are, it's quite amazing.
Then there's a few of them you see were cannibalised, you see, putting different words to it and different meanings and things like that.
This happens all over the world, and that's the fascinating thing about it.
This is where it's lost its origin, but
but I think we would have done that too, you know, to a certain extent, because the way music and tunes travel around, they travel traditionally with soldiers, with the armies, and with sailors. A very interesting thing happened to me a few years ago. Sorry, I should have turned that off, but just ignore that's my phone going there. I was doing a thing for, I think it was RT or something, and I was representing Ulster-Scots, and there's this woman called Mairead who's with this big famous band called Altan, a famous Irish band. She was from the Irish speaking area of Donegal. Anyway, they come down and played a few tunes with us, and then we went to Donegal and played a few tunes with them. That's what it's all about. But we're talking a lot about the origins of tunes, and somehow I've come up about these Kerry polkas. There's a type of dance tune that all Irish traditional musicians play called the Kerry polkas. And I was listening to them and I was thinking, that's the same as a lot of the band tunes, you know, almost identical. And the phrases are certainly identical. And then this boy came up with, he's one of the TV producers, he came up with it. He said, I understand why that is. He said the Scottish regiments of the British Army were very strongly based in Kerry for years. And that's when they started to develop their dance music. So they picked up these tunes from the Scottish soldiers. But they came to Ulster directly from Scotland. Yet, you know, people who play Irish traditional music now here are picking up those tunes from Kerry that went from Scotland to Kerry and come back up here, you know. So I think that's fascinating, you know.
It's trying to find out what tradition did it come from.
But the thing is, the conclusion I come to, it doesn't really matter.
No.
In a sense, you know, and it shows that how music can sort of transcend boundaries, and you know, because if something's been played in our tradition for generations as part of our tradition, it doesn't mean that it's not also English or Scottish or American or Irish, you know. But it's just that is the key thing about music, that it does sort of transcend boundaries and ethnic groups, you know, because it just keeps moving, you know.
I see many times what it changed from the day it was made through decades and generations, how many times it changed.
I mean, who wrote there's me stealing whoever wrote the Orange Flute. I'm changing these lyrics, you know.
You go to the Ulster-Scots movement, you know, there were two big movements. Most people here now consider it with the 16th, 17th century when the Scotsmen came to Ulster. 1,000 years earlier, the Ulster men had colonised Scotland. Have you ever had any interest in going back to that time?
That is really, really interesting to bring that up. I actually feel very strongly about that, you know, because it's something that gets totally overlooked. And the reason why it gets overlooked is because it's something that both sides here can actually relate to, you know, because folk have been going back and over the shock, as I call it, between Ulster and Scotland right throughout history. And I would like to think that my ancestors, as far as I can trace back, I'm pretty certain that my ancestors, even though most of them seem to, or all of them I can find out came from Scotland at one point, they would have had this ancient connection with Ulster. And that's very important to understand that, you know, because they just went begging for it. And they didn't only go to the Western Islands and, you know, northwest Scotland. That was the one big migration in the 5th century or something, you know. But they also went down to Galway and down there, like my name, Drennan. There's a place called Dundrennan Abbey down near Dumfries, and that's where they reckon most of the Drennans came from, because people were called by the places. There was a whole big industry going there around this abbey, which after the Reformation was shut down, you know, and everybody moved away, but the people who lived there and worked there were a lot of them would have been called Drennan because they're from Dundrennan. But that original settlement was actually a Gaelic name. You know, came from people from Ulster moving down there, you know, in the 5th century or something, you know. So
it's not something that's really interested you, though. Your main interest is the music.
Oh no, I
15th
say.
and 16th.
No, I am interested in that too.
Yeah.
Funny. Well, I'm just after 1:30 today. I'm having a meeting with some people in connection with an American TV company who want to do a thing in the Scottish area at the minute, right? But they're asking me for my opinion, and I'm actually encouraging them to explore that, you know, as one of the programs, explore the ancient links, not just the people coming over during the plantation in the 1700s, but go back to that because it's really absolutely fascinating. They're so rich. You know, you look at those all those castles there, and Glenarm Castle and Dunluce Castle, and those are all Scottish clans that run those, you know. And so No, I'm definitely into it. I mean, once you get into that it's the music. The 17th century plantation is very, very significant because the way we talk, or some of us talk anyway, but even in Belfast you pick up a lot of these Ulster-Scots words, you know. And the way we think, that sort of mindset, has so much to do with that time period.
Yeah.
And the music as well. But and there's none of those tunes. I mean, it'd be very difficult to find old songs and old tunes that go back. Well, maybe the London Derriere is something that is an ancient tune that, you know, things like that. But it's there's not so much to draw on from a musical aspect, you know. But you can certainly make it up. You can write songs about the time period and stuff, you know. So no, something that you see, it's because. In the Ulster-Scots movement, they would have focused on that time period because that was that's what made Ulster-Scots people here today so distinct, you know.
We're still living that.
And then on the Irish side, they didn't want to get too much into that ancient aspect either, because that sort of confirms that we were always linked with the mainland, you know. So it's sort of the other side to sort of promote that ancient connection, you know. But
Penny, just before you came today, we had another speaker from Corrymeela, an archaeologist site, and tell about the number of ancient old sites going back to the Bronze Age and so forth. There are in Ireland, thousands of them, but 90% of them are in Northern Ireland. So there was people living here for thousands of years before the Gaels even turned up.
That's correct.
That we've been wiped off history.
And I think it was because of the proximity to the two landmasses between Ulster and Scotland, that so many people seem to come here first.
Yeah.
You know, that was the shortest sea route, you know. So no.
How did you go in America when you were touring, Billy? How did you go down there?
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Well, I mostly lived in Canada, but I mean, I did travel through the States as well, and then we've been out on two significant trips to America with my band, you know, and playing. One was the Scotch-Irish Symposium. Funny enough, that was many years ago, and this is where this TV opportunity is coming from. And the other one was in Kentucky. And we played a lot with the old mountain music, not the bluegrass fiddlers, but the people who are into the old mountain style, you know.
Is there still Scottish ancestors living out in the Blue Country?
Oh, aye. So the funny thing is that so many of these people who were into the old mountain style music, they all say they're Scotch-Irish.
Yeah.
You know, that there's no, you know, they might have had, typical Americans, they might have 5 or 6 different ethnic groups in their bloodline, you know. Yeah. But they claim to be Scotch-Irish, that's the main influence on their culture and on their music that they play.
The clan name, they still go for the clan name. The McDonald's and all this, the Campbells and all.
Well, that's a wee bit different, you see, because that's Scottish as opposed to Ulster-Scots.
Yeah.
The Scotch-Irish were basically people who came from Ulster. They may have only been living here for one generation, come from Scotland first, you know, but whatever. But they would see themselves as being a bit distinct from the Scots who came directly from Scotland, you know, because they were affected by what was going on here in Ulster, you know, because you know, they left Ulster because they were at odds with the establishment, you know, because they were mostly Presbyterian or non-conformists, and you know, there was different reasons at different time periods, but they were sort of challenging the establishment. And that's the whole reason why the American Revolution probably took off. Not the whole reason, but they would have been in. That was probably the main driving force, was the attitude of the Scotch-Irish and folk from Ulster coming out, you know. But interesting, when I was living in Canada, I was approached by, I lived in Canada for 11, no, tell you a lie, I lived in Canada for 14 and a half years, and mostly in Nova Scotia. and there I met people who were ancestors. Well, one man in particular was the ancestor of, a descendant of the first Irish settlers who actually left Londonderry in the 1700s, and they went to New England, northern states at first, and then they moved into Canada at that point, And he approached me about setting up the Ulster-Scots Society of Canada, which we did. This is before we even knew there was an Ulster-Scots movement on here, because it was Canadians who were searching their roots, and so we had members in every province in Canada. But we also got a lot of connections with people in America who became members of the Canadian Society, and most of them were connected to Scottish societies, but they realised there was nothing really for them because they traced their ancestors who have come from Ulster, So, there would be a lot of those Highland Gallerans in Scotland that are distinctly Scottish, and I think some Scotch areas sort of connect in with that, but...
Is it a growing thing within? Is it a growing movement? Like
I say it is. I think it sort of maybe died out for a while because there was an old Scotch Irish society and stuff, but there's a growing awareness of it. There are quite a few books written in recent times by Americans about it,
So what's coming across all this time that you lived abroad? Your accents never changed, like there was nothing American coming through there, or Canadian?
Well, you see, I've been back now for 17 years. When I was living in Canada, I had to drop a lot of stuff because, not so much my accent, but things that we would say, because you just get people looking at you and they just think you're just talking nonsense, Like for instance, one thing that flashed on the other day, I remember saying to this neighbour of mine, oh, you see your man up the road there? Your man must tell me. She says, he's not my man. So things like that happen all the time. You have to realise just conscious of what you say.
You walk into your room and there's an empty chair, anybody's sitting there.
Exactly.
Well, I want to give you an excuse to have a commercial. I hope you've brought some CDs along with you.
Funny.
And I'd like you to tell us what's on your different. Can you tell us what's on your different CDs? Oh, there you go. Go for it.
Right. Well.
Because I'm sure you've got more than one CD. That's why I want you to tell us what we'll get which one we buy.
Right. Well, with the Ulster-Scots Folk Orchestra, which I helped set up, we brought out 13 or 14 CDs. I don't have all of them. Some of those are printed at the minute, but I have most of them. When I sell out, I usually get some more done, you see. And then, so I have that, and well, one of the ones, actually I forgot to do, if I have time, I'll do one more wee poem, and I'll do it off the Psalm CD.
Good.
Which I'm almost sold out. I've only got 3 copies of that, so. But the reason why I was going to do this poem is because the Psalm CD was all about the First World War. We brought it out in 2006. It was the 90th anniversary of the Psalm. But of course next year is the 100th anniversary, so maybe come back into
the
bargain for it. And we looked at the First World War from every perspective, from the idea, a lot of the old marching tunes were on there, and also looked at it from the futility of war as well. And also looked at it from the Irish side. It's very, very interesting just what's happening now in Southern Ireland with more of an awareness of the fact that tens of thousands of young Irish men, Catholics and nationalists, were killed in both World Wars, and I was at a thing last year in Cavan. For the first time they had a monument for the thousands of men who died in the Cavan area, and we did a wee reenactment parade with fifes and drums. Absolutely no objection to it whatsoever. It was well attended. So it's just great to see that awareness of that. So we did one song at least to sort of acknowledge that. But the other tune we have, sorry, just to answer your question there, but we did one CD just with the crossover with North American tunes, All the other CDs are a combination of fiddle tunes, traditional ballads, maybe a wee poem, and the lamb beg drum was always on there, and there's usually a bagpipe tune as well. So they're all a similar mixture to that. But if I have time, I've no idea what time it is.
Go ahead, please.
Well, actually, we set this on the CD. We set this tune, this poem I wrote to this tune, and you'll recognise the tune, but we thought it was an appropriate tune for it. And I read a story before we did this CD. I read up everything I could about the First World War. I knew a fair bit about it because I had actually 4 great uncles who fought in the First World War, and 2 of them had been 2 of them were wounded at the Somme and went on to be killed. They were all, and the other one was injured as well, but the other 2 were killed in Ypres. I don't know if, is it Ypres? Why Ypres?
Passchendaele.
Aye. It was Belgium anyway. I think they're in 2 different cemeteries. So I always had a great interest in it, but I found out more and more about it. I actually went up to what you call the museum up there at the top of the Shankill.
Fernhill House.
Aye, I got a lot of information out of them, because they had all the records of the family graves and all, so I was able to get photographs of my family graves and all that. But anyway, one of the aspects that sort of struck me was the story of the people who were shot as deserters, because a lot of people were shot as deserters, but it seems that in many cases, if not most cases, the reason why people wandered off was because they were shell-shocked.
That's right.
Because this was the first time that, big, loud guns and machinery was actually, this was the first war where they had that, so people were hearing massive bombs going off in their head, and they were just shell-shocked, as the term that was used, but they didn't understand that, and so the thing was that anybody that they considered to be a deserter was just court-martialed there and then, and shot at dawn. So this is the story of a young man from the Shankill Road. This is a story. Anyway, I'll just play a wee bit of the tune here to get the mood. Young Crozier went off to fight the good fight, for he knew it was right, to fight the good fight for the old cause that gave us our freedom, religion and laws. In France, he got tore right into the battle with all the reek and roar and rattle. He never stopped to wonder why, he heard only the ancient battle cry. But soon the war left him all shattered and shook, as those fell around him wherever he'd look. But the blood and the gore and the yells and the smell, he knew he'd landed next door to hell. The bombs and the bullets, they whizzed by his head and left those around him dying or dead. They banged in his ear and they banged in his brain, banged till he went daft, till he went insane. His mind went off, another world to wander. His body went off just for a wee danner. For a week he dannered the green fields of France. For a week he dannered around in a trance. In his mind, he was off on Ulster ground, homeward bound, heading for Belfast town. On the Shankill Road, his mates he would meet, while his mother sat waiting on Battenberg Street. When they found him, he was fit no more to fight. Fit no more to fight for the old cause that gave us our freedom, religion and laws. A deserter, they said, to the old cause that gave us our freedom, religion and laws. Court-martialed there and then and sentenced to death. his time had come to breathe his last breath. To meet his maker, he was called upon in ceremonious slaughter to be shot at dawn. They filled him full of whiskey to deaden the pain. Handcuffed and blindfolded, young Crozier was slain. On the Shankill road, he had wondered where went all wrong. Young Crozier had gone off, singing his song. Proud to fight for the old cause that gave him his freedom, religion and laws.